CK Wetland Services on site. We're out on delineation here, northern Itasca County, Minnesota, out in the Arrowhead. Had a little chance to do a little video here between sites, so we're gonna do a little walkthrough of delineation, kind of what we typically see. So we're just heading down to the property here. I have a small little site with a trail through it. Looks like a pretty small delineation. I usually try to take the trail. And typically my process is first get on site, try to do a walk through the whole property, really see what's going on the property. Overall, this site is a lot of higher elevation, not a lot of wetland on the site from what I can tell from the aerial imagery, LiDAR, nothing on the NWI really. On various aerial imageries we did in our pre-field work recon, didn't really appear a lot of wetland, but as we get close to down to this lake shore, it appears we do have some wetland here. So again, it's looking like a type 7, what we call in Minnesota, hardwood swamp, black ash swamp. Pretty common, one of our more dominant wetland types across the greater northern part of Minnesota here. So black ash are pretty easy to tell by the leaves and the bark right here. So pretty distinct from a distance, especially when we get in the middle of the growing season here. Everything's popping out pretty good right now. So looks like a nice, overall a nice pretty delineation out here. So should be a pretty good day here. As I walk too, the ground feels pretty soft. So as I kind of, you can definitely tell there's some saturation or, not too much mineral soil. And then do kind of a flag and delineation video here. I'll come back, but just wanted to do a quick little intro video on today's field visit. So, well, another day, another rain. The thing about doing delineations is it always smells like roses. We're out here, it's been lightning earlier and now it's just thunder, so I think we're okay, but it's always trying to get through the thick of things, and it's not always the most fun because we have to go this way. So that's kind of part of doing delineations too, is to try to navigate through the thick of things and get back to the road. So okay, so as we're out here, got a type 7 wetland we're going to delineate. So before we get set up, I have an EOS Aero Gold Plus GNSS receiver on my backpack. It's one of the higher top end GNSS receivers out there. We can certainly use it for elevation. I mean, we can usually get a few centimeters on elevation, so close to survey grade accuracy, so we can get elevations and topos. But generally today, we're not too worried about the height and the 3D elevation. We're more worried about the horizontal elevation. So yeah, that's kind of what we use. And I use this Trimble TDC 600 tablet. One thing I like about it, got the hand strap here. Certainly I want my delineation area, that little red box there. So the blue is me. I have contours on here. Generally, I can put soils. So we've got some NWI on there on the lake here. So not a lot of features showing up. And then as I go out here, I have a wet map set up. So I just drop points of flags and then label it. That's my general kind of protocol. So I put in the date, Minnesota wetland type. So we're out in this hardwood swamp. I kind of delineate by the bacon edge. So then as I go, I just drop points. So generally what we do is we do like A1, A2, A3 for our first line. And then on the next line, we'll do, like, if it's the same wetland, we'll do A100, 101, 102. Our next line, if we're connecting stuff, A200, 201, 203, if it's the same wetland. So we do an alphanumeric wetlands. Our first wetland number, so if we find a wetland, I call it wetland A. And then as we get to the data points, I'll correspond it with a DP wet A1. And then if we do an upland, I'll do DP wet upland, or DP upland A1 to correspond it with. So essentially I'll do a wetland A for our first wetland, wetland B for our next wetland, wetland C, vice versa. So all our data points are corresponding to that wetland. One thing I'm doing here is I'm walking the boundary. I'm really kind of looking at some of this vegetation here, these sedges. What else we got? So this is bracken fern, this is FACW. We got some sedges here. That's kind of what we're doing to, you know, look at the boundary. We got some pretty black soil here. So yeah, we're just kind of trying to find that transition here. You know, as I'm out here, you know, here's some other vegetation that we'll see. So here we got some sensitive fern. So that's definitely a wetland one. We have a little hazel here, American hazelnut, so that's a FACW one. You see it in wetlands a lot. You know, as I walk out here, we're still kind of in that hardwood swamp. You know, there's kind of a fringe of some shrub here, sedges, and then we get out into the lake, you know, the lake shore, the ordinary high water line over there. So maybe there's a little bit of a shrub or wet meadow, sedge meadow on the edge. So we might do another data point, but we're going to kind of walk to this other edge here. Now there's some other things, some other plants I see over here. So we have more sensitive fern, wild sarsaparilla. So this is upland species, or a FACW. So yeah, there's some black bracken fern, kind of a mixed. You know, we're probably at the transition. I mean, I typically see a lot of this largely faster stuff here. So this is real important in Minnesota, this largely faster. That's an upland species. So a lot of our wetland, I mean, this is probably a key point of this video, but a lot of our plants transitions, you know, we see these black ash, sedges, various wetland species, and then we'll see a hard break. You know, I don't know if you can see it right now, but we'll see a hard break of sedges, and then it's like largely faster bracken fern, wild sarsaparilla, and a whole bunch of upland plants. So, you know, you don't have to be a botany expert out here, but you just kind of got to know those transition plants and what those indicators are. That's a key thing. So a lot of that's going on in my head as I walk this boundary. You know, what the species is on the transition, what the indicator is. So better, you know, especially in some areas where, you know, we gotta send that data to some engineers or designers, maybe architects, set that boundary. Occasionally parts of the country or different other states or watersheds still have certain setbacks from you know, based on some buffer rules and different watershed and ordinances, local ordinances. They might have certain setbacks from the wetland. Some counties do not. You can build right up into the wetland, but you know, some areas there's certain setbacks. You know, we'll also mark the edge of the ordinary high water line because there's setbacks for that too. I guess I want to do one more little clip here. So this is a lot of Carrick stricta out here. They have these big tall hummocks, very common out in a lot of these floodplains, and you know, I would say like river edges, lake edges, pretty easy to identify. Not too nice to walk through, especially if you got to go a long ways, and yeah, they're pretty indicative of a seasonally flooded wetland. You know, the water will intermittently go high in the spring and then drop down. So you see these like 2-3 foot, can really break an ankle on top. So we're on site. Kind of got that my boundary and transition determined pretty well, I think. So we're right in the edge of the property line. You know, as I'm looking on the ground, you see a pretty good break of transition. Typically my process is, you know, I come out edge of the property, and I'll drop our wetland flag. So this will be a point out here. So I'll drop a point. So I call this typically like an A1, our first point. I have our wetland number, I have our date, and then as you can see, we have, you know, less than an inch accuracy. I usually sit there, I hit update, and then I submit it. So once I have my point, you know, we have our field vest with our flagging in it, with various flagging stuff in it. So, you know, as we have it, I have it in my pocket on a little quick pull hole here. So, you know, we'll grab it here, the flagging. You know, take a decent amount out. You know, here's our nice. You know, I try to use trees too. So typically we'll, you know, take a you know, portion of it, a couple feet out, grab it. try to put it, at least head level or higher is better, especially if it's thick. But, here it's, out here in this hardwood swamp, it's pretty open. I mean, some years get really thick when dense vegetation. So if the reviewers come out, the TEP panel, they come out and let's say do a spot check on the project, they want to be able to see that boundary. And then once we have it flagged, we usually put a number on it, an ID, so they can tell. So like this one, I call A1. Doesn't have to be real fancy, but we're only dropping a dozen points out here, if that. So typically if I get, stuck on where that boundary is, I'll walk into the wetland like I am now, stomp the feet kind of, look around, and then work my way back. I look back at the other flag there, work my way back, and then I find, we're for sure wetland. Okay, I'm for sure upland here. So first thing I do, spin my backpack. Actually, let me go back to that last one for a minute. So as we have our last point, I just hit copy. I copy the attributes. I change the last numerical number from A1 to A2. I'll hit update point, submit, which saves it. And then we throw my pocket. That's one thing I like about the hand strap, especially if you're by yourself, or we have teams of two, which occasionally we'll do. It really depends on the project and how big. This is a pretty easy one. I'm kind of doing between projects. So, and then we write A2 with a Sharpie. We just kind of keep going on the boundary here. Same process. You walk around, find our transition. So, as we go here, I see some raspberry, which is FAC, a lot of wild sarsaparilla, bracken fern. We got bunchberry here, we got twin flower, Linnea borealis, bracken ferns. So there's a lot of FACW species there. This is looking pretty dominant of an upland area here. False Solomon seal, wild sarsaparilla again, horsetail. But the big one for me is this large leaf aster here. That's in the upland, especially when it's really very dominant here. And then we have that point copied from before. I'll grab it, copy again, go A3, and then just keep going. So drop a point, got good accuracy, grab our flagging. So after you flag for a couple hours, it gets pretty, especially on some projects that are pretty big, that just a lot of drainages, and the wetlands go up and down on some few hundred acre parcels and stuff. For larger developments, they can really sit there and flag all day. It can really get to you. One thing about doing delineations too is it's not always easy walking. I mean, sometimes you're starting to walk through and you get really into some thick brush, but that's one of the things of doing delineations is we always strive for high quality data. And that's one thing we do where we try to work out the project details before we initiate a project is what area do they need delineated. Trying to get that project area delineation limits is the key. So I just took a soil core here from this wetland. As you can tell, this is pretty black soil, looks pretty organic. So this is pretty indicative of a wetland soil, pretty black. So, and that's typical characteristics of a wetland here, about what I expected. And a lot of times too, what's pretty indicative of wetlands is, we have this organic black soil, and then looks to probably a depth of about 6 inches, give or take. And then usually that a lot of times that'll be overlaid by more of a grayish soil, so more depleted underneath here. So it is pretty sandy here, but as we kind of keep going. But yeah, as you can tell here, this is more of a grayer soil underneath that black soil. So we probably have a depleted matrix here, and then also an organic top layer. We try to use a lot of technology out here. So obviously there's plants we encounter. We try to look it up in some of our field books, but so I know this species here. This is sensitive fern. I use this PlantNet, which is really good, probably my favorite. So I'll use this. So let's say this is plant here. I don't know the name. I have to look it up. We'll usually snap pictures, and sometimes I can identify it. Using the back of my head, I have a few that I think it might be. So it's, a lot of times it's more of a verification for it. But yeah, we we grab it. You can tell if it's like a leaf, a bark, a flower. But yeah, just like that, like I thought, it was sensitive fern, 98% accuracy. Has the scientific name right there. You can look at some information on it. Make sure it's in the same region where it's located. Then we can look on our north central northeast plant list, or for the which plant list we're in, depending on which Army Corps of Engineer region we're in. Find that an indicator. That's a nice little indicator app too. One other thing I want to do is when we're out here too, we shoot photos. Typically I just shoot them with my cell phone, if you can see that. But I have this it's called a Solo Locator app, but on top it's got a compass direction. If you see as we move, got the compass direction, got lat long, what direction, our approximate elevation, time it was shot. The big thing when we pull it into ArcGIS, ArcPro, it's geolocated. We can put it in and convert it very easy as points. So I can click on those points when we're digitizing and making our final map, and really see what it was like on the ground from the field team. I mean, most projects, if we have less than 50 photos, something's probably wrong. So always get a lot of photos on the ground. You never know. You can see some hydric indicators. We might take, we'll take some photos of soil, what the soil horizons look like. Really, it's pretty important. Those photos are really key. And then also on our reports, at least for delineations, we'll have an attachment of our photo logs and kind of what we saw out there. Wrapping up some of the field work here for the day. Doing another wetland data point at this. This is generally a type 7 hardwood swamp out here. A lot of black ash. So did our data point. Typically I come out, first thing I do, I'll GPS the position here with our tablet. I'll shoot a nice photo for the report on here, just to have that. And then one thing we do here is we use electronic data sheets. Typically a lot quicker, a little more time in the field, but definitely less time in the office. A lot of places are using those now, so it's definitely has come a long way. I use BioApp. I think it's the best value. Great for get some of those fillable automatic calculations. Good price, and they're local in Minnesota, so I find them the best. First thing out here, we have that. I'm just trying to see if we can see any of this. Yeah, this is kind of our BioApp. So we have our data point. So this is what I call DP Wet A1. We have our date, a location, some of the background information on it. I also shoot a photo of it on here. So on the tablet, I'll also grab a snapshot of the photo, what it looks like. So this is what collecting a data point kind of looks like out in the field. We'll collect a photo out there, and that gets thrown right into our data sheets on the bottom. So we have that. If we need some remarks on it, classification, it'll automatically fill in our whether we have hydrophytic vegetation, wetland hydrology, and wetlands or hydric soils, our 3 indicators we typically look for out here. We don't always need all 3 of those indicators, but that's really what we strive for. And there's a few indicators that we have to look for after we do our soil pits, but surface water, high water table, saturation, watermark, sediment deposits, drift deposits, those are real common. Water stained leaves. We see thick muck surface, drainage patterns, moss trim lines, stunted or stressed plants, geomorphic position, fact neutral test, microtopo relief. So on the first page too is, we get a lot of that, the background, the spatial info, the background data. So it's got our location on here, and we can populate the state, the county, the section, township, range we're in, the sub-region we're in, what map we're in. If there's an NWI classification, it pulls that. Yeah, so we have the hydrology. I have some pre-fillable remarks. So the surface water, water table, and saturation. That's any kind of water, standing water. A high water table is within 12 inches of the surface. We're going to have black ash, pretty high percent out here, definitely more than 50. I don't know about 100, but somewhere in that ballpark there. We do have Franctus nigra. We do have some birch out here, Beltula peperferneria. You know, we always try to use scientific names when I'm looking at stuff. I know it's easy for a lot of people to say, oh, black ash, this, that. There's a lot of common names and there's only one scientific name. So people call different species, different indicators, but you know, the real only indicator is try to use a scientific name. So we have our scientific name, you know, black ash. So we have our indicator, whether it's obligate, FAC wet, FAC up, or upland. Those are kind of the 5 indicators every, you know, plant species has. And then we separate those by stratum. So I usually start with the tree stratum. So, you know, the trees are anything within 30 feet, greater than 3 inches in a DBH. So typically we'll get a few species out here, but not a ton. So I kind of look around. I usually start with the dominant ones, start entering them. See a little red maple out there. We do see a little birch, which is an upland one. You know, I kind of look around. Is there anything else that stands out? I do see a little quaking aspen popple in the distance. Then we're pretty much on to our next stratum here. And then again, any kind of woody trees less than 3 inches in diameter. So we do have some black ash, a decent amount on the shrub stratum, and there also is some hazel. And then we go through all the vegetation, the ground layers, so the herbaceous species generally within 5. You know, we have some raspberry down there. We also have some lady fern, a real common fern right here that we see pretty often. And then based on the percentages and what, you know, which species are dominant, you know, we'll do a few tests on here. Actually, it does the calculations on here for you. But you know, there's a dominant test. Is there more dominant species? Is it greater than 50%? If it meets that, then we have hydrophytic vegetation.